Ethan, how about you read one for us?
Okay. During the months of June, July, and August of last year, we had at Luebo, another region of terror, or another reign of terror. A new officer named Deschamps had just come into power at Lulaberg. During my absence, he came to Luebo, and there, without a warning to the chiefs or villagers, sent out his soldiers to catch men by force wherever they could be found. People fled at once to the forest for safety. I made a complaint to the authorities about the matter and demanded protection for the natives and urged that none be taken by force. This Monsieur Deuce promised within a few days, however, he received imperative orders from his chief, Deschamps. Consequently, he began catching the people by force. They fled to the forest for safety. The soldiers scoured the woods in search of men. They succeeded in catching about 18 or 20, and these I saw taken away under guard, tied about the neck with ropes. This whole affair I reported to the Native Protection Commission appointed by the king some years ago, asking it to see that the natives were protected in their rights. The only answer I received was that the state established forced labor by law, and that doubtless the officers were acting entirely within their powers.
Alright, so this missionary who saw this whole thing happen, people being captured and forced into the labor, reported the affair to this commission that was set up by the king to protect the natives. And we know that King Leopold would set up, he had this disguise of trying to help the people, and obviously this commission was also another disguise that he was hiding behind. So when it was reported, it was just kind of, I'm sure there really isn't even a commission that will receive these complaints, so I'm sure it just went to deaf ears, and it was just kind of shrugged off when he asked about it. So yeah, this was very much covered up. A lot of these atrocities were covered up by the Leopold administration. Turn the page, and I'm just going to read one more on page 47. The first full one there, Mr. Kirby, an American missionary, his testimony. Alright, so the further away from publicity, the greater the atrocities, such as the employment of fierce cannibal soldiers that terrorize the people, the shooting down of 20 male Congolese to pay for a lost dog, the forcing of Congolese to drink from latrines, and the shooting down of handcuffed blacks. So the further away from people who would report what they saw, the worse the atrocities. Do you guys know what a latrine is? It's basically like a porta potty. So Congolese were forced to drink from that. They were forced to, they were shot down if they couldn't pay for a lost dog. All right. There were cannibal soldiers, like we talked before, that would terrorize the people. Right, and then there was a shooting down of people whose hands were cuffed. They weren't able to do anything. They weren't able to protect themselves. So we read through these testimonies, and we realize the atrocities that are happening in the Congo. These are just, there's about 30 stories here, and this is only 30, right? And think about the hundreds or thousands of other stories there are of people and what they saw and what they witnessed. And a lot of those stories will never be told because they were either killed or they're just lost to time. So think about hundreds and thousands of more stories that are just like this, right? Think about the vast amount of what was going on in the Congo. All right, and so how can we, how did the Europeans justify what they were doing? How could they show that it was okay, that what they were doing was within reason? And for much of the time, it wasn't found. It was very secret. But as it was leaked out, as these stories were leaked to the public, how did King Leopold, how did society justify what was happening? And we see that with imperialism, that a lot of these actions were justified for some reason. And a lot of it had to do with this very deep form of racism. But it's important to understand this point of view, this justification for imperialism, because we see imperialism not only in Africa, but in India, in Vietnam or Southeast Asia, in China, and even the United States was imperialistic for a little while with the Philippines, Cuba, Guam, and Puerto Rico. So we need to understand this point of view that they're coming from in order to understand why they did it and why they kept doing it. Okay, so the focus question here is, after reading these testimonies and knowing that the word was spreading of the atrocities, how could it be justified? So even as the word was being leaked out about what was going on, how could it be justified in the face of that? Right, so one of the things is the white man's burden, and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, but this is basically the white man's moral duty to help civilize the uncivilized nations in the world. Okay, so they thought it was upon themselves to bring civilization, to bring light to dark places, right? And what they didn't realize is that these nations, these people, were already happy being where they were and who they were. They were happy with their cultures and their traditions. So with that, the white man's burden comes this idea that we are naturally superior, that our practices and our cultures are superior to yours, so you need to adopt ours. Does that make sense? All right, so it's the white man's burden to bring that to uncivilized nations. Here we have a political cartoon showing the white man's burden. You can see Uncle Sam in the front there, and there are these figures of America and Great Britain and France are being carried by people from these undeveloped nations. So in the front we have them being carried by, it looks like possibly like a man from the Philippines, and then we have the Great Britain being carried by a man from India. Okay, so is it really a burden? It shouldn't be a burden. Really, the burden is on who in this picture? Who has to carry all the weight? Yeah, the people who are carrying Uncle Sam and the British guy. They're really carrying the weight of having to deal with them, having to go through all the torture and labor and rules and policies that are put in place on them. Right? The burden is really on them. Okay, so white man's burden. There's also an idea called social Darwinism. You know, Darwinism is a theory that those who are able to move on in society have, like, they're able to survive. It's the survival of the fittest. They're able to beat out everyone else because of the natural abilities or genes that they have. So eventually this idea was applied to society during imperialism. So these ideas began to spring up, like, why are some people poor and others rich? Why do some live in tall buildings and others in grass huts? Why do some people have light skin and others have dark skin? Right, these questions started to come up, and their answer was that, well, obviously those who are doing well, so those who are rich, those who have money, those who are living in tall buildings, those who have light skin, they are the best of the best, right? They have the genes and the best genes and the best abilities to move forward in society. Whereas those who are uncivilized, right, who live in grass huts, who are poor and who have dark skin, obviously their genes and their abilities are not the best. They're inferior to ours. So this kind of hierarchy is created based on abilities and genes, right? So in the 1880s, this becomes a new justification for imperialism. It creates this idea that we are superior to you, and you are inferior to us, because we obviously have moved forward in the world, and you have stayed back in the dark. Okay. Oops. All right. So here are a couple ads that have been portrayed in magazines and newspapers. All right, so take a look at the one on the left there. It says at the top, "I have found Pear's soap matchless for the hands and complexion." So what's going on in that picture? This is a primary source, right? And we need to be able to read these primary sources to understand points of view and perspective and what's going on in history. All right, so what's going on in this picture? What do you think, Anne? Yep. So in the first picture on the left, this little black baby's in the tub, and this little white kid is holding out the pear soap, right? And then in this picture right here, he's done being cleaned, and his skin has changed to white, right? And his face and his neck are still black, showing that maybe he didn't wash his face and neck. But after cleaning himself, he's now white. So what does that say? What is the meaning behind this? What is this ad trying to get across? Go ahead.
Africans are dirty.
Right? Yes, Africans are dirty. If they have dark skin, that means they are dirty, and it can be cleaned with this soap, right? So it's not only an ad for a soap, but it's showing this idea that white people are superior to black people because of the color of their skin. White people are clean, right? Black people are dirty and therefore inferior. Okay, and this is obviously not true, right? But it's this idea that is perpetuated throughout society in order to justify what they're doing. Right? So one of the main things of people going into Africa is to civilize the nations, right? To make them clean. Okay? The ad on the right here, it's another pear soap ad. And I'll read it out loud to you because you can't really see it. It says, "The first step towards lightening the white man's burden is through teaching the virtues of cleanliness. Pear soap is a potent factor in brightening the dark corners of the earth as civilization advances, while amongst the cultured of all nations, it holds the highest place. It is the ideal bathroom soap." Okay, so it comes right out and says, this helps the white man's burden. This lightens the load of the white man's burden because it will help. This soap will help clean those dark corners of the earth. They'll bring light to the dark corners of the earth. Okay, so this idea that of cleanliness, that if you are clean, you are civilized. If you are unclean, which your black skin shows, then you are uncivilized. Okay, so these ideas are perpetuated through ads, through magazines, that the Africans are inferior, that they're dirty, while also elevating the white race, saying that they are clean, that they are superior because of their skin. All right, this is another very famous picture of the time of imperialism in Africa. This man that's portrayed is named Henry Morton Stanley, and he was an explorer that was hired by King Leopold of Belgium to go into the Congo and to make these treaties among the chiefs in order to gain land for Belgium. Okay, so he's really well depicted by his hat, his explorer's hat that he always has on or is holding. So everyone during this time could recognize him. But what is this picture portraying? What is it showing you? Like, what do you see is happening? Go ahead, CJ. What do you see?
Standing over Africa.
Yep, he's got one foot planted in the south and one foot planted in the north, right? And what does he have from his hands going down to the ground? What's going from his hands? I mean, what do you think that is? Looks like a string, right? Maybe that he has hold over the country. I don't know if it's meant to show that it's like a marionette puppet, like he's able to control it. So what is this meaning? What is this picture trying to get across? What is the message? What do you think, Allie?
He controls Africa.
Yeah, that the white man can control Africa just by going into the societies and transforming them. You can control Africa. It shows that the white man, is dominant over Africa. Okay, he's able to stand on it. He's able to expand his arms over it, right, claiming it as his own. Okay, good. What I want you to do for the last 10 minutes here is get together with two or three people in your own group. Okay, so you can form your own groups. And what I want you to do is to